Let me read to you a passage from the 16th chapter of St. John's Gospel, verses 23 to 28. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 6th week of Eastertide. St. John writes, Jesus said to his disciples, I tell you the truth. My Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now, you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask, and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. Though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day, you will ask in my name. I am not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world. Now I am leaving the world and going back to the Father. That's from John chapter 16, verses 23 to 28. What does it suggest to us? Well, you know, there are many tests of faith. One test is, for instance, suffering. A person suffers greatly and he loses faith in God. Alternatively, a person suffers greatly and believes in God the more. For instance, a person goes off to war and undergoes terrible experiences. He comes back a changed man for the worse. He cannot settle down in his marriage and proves to be a terrible trial to his wife and children and abandons the practice of his Christian faith. Another person, perhaps even his own brother, goes off to war and undergoes terrible sufferings but gains a reputation among his comrades for his indomitable Christian faith. He prays for the enemy towards whom he aims his weapon, and he comes back far more mature in his Catholic faith than he was before. He has passed the test while the other has failed it. You know, there are many other tests of religious faith, and I'd like to speak of one of them. One, for instance, is prayer, and more specifically, the prayer of petition, in which we ask God for what we need. This kind of prayer, the prayer in which we not only cultivate the presence of God, the prayer in which we not only thank God for favours, but the prayer in which we ask God for what we want and need, is the most common. It is at the root of the practice of religion in numerous societies across centuries of human history. Indigenous societies turn to the unseen powers because of their need, and they invoke their aid. And so it is with many advanced societies in history. Man is all too aware of his need in the face of a world that does not respect his convenience, and he asks the help of the powers that do control the world and its forces. Man's sense of his limitations, his own transience, his vulnerability, and in general his need, lead him spontaneously to the prayer of petition. But now, what of modern secular man who tends to think that the world is not dependent, moment by moment, on a higher power? Modern religious man tends, I think, to be a deist or a pantheist. He tends not to regard the world as being in constant and radical dependence on a transcendent God for its very being. If he is not religious at all, but totally secular, he looks on this world as the ultimate in reality. This world is all there is. So he does not engage much in the prayer of petition, because it has no point for him. Christ warmly encourages us to ask God, him, the Father and the Holy Spirit, for what we need. Consider what he says in the Gospel passage I read a few minutes ago. I tell you the truth, he says. My Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. St. Alphonsus Liguori, in one of his books, writes that the prayer of petition is of great importance for salvation, because many of the graces we need come to us if we ask for them. To take a fundamental example, baptism. It is because the parents of a child come to the church to ask God for baptism that the child receives the great and foundational grace of baptism. It is the result of a prayer of petition. One of the reasons why we do not receive much more from God is that we do not ask Him for more. This relates not only to spiritual favours, but to material favours as well. I remember a very elderly woman lost something most precious and necessary for her. She searched and searched with mounting anxiety, and finally in desperation asked me to join with her in prayer that she would find what she was looking for and what she needed desperately. 2 minutes later, after the prayer, she found it, to her exhilaration. The saints are our heavenly models and intercessors before God. They join their prayers with ours, and the Church has nominated some saints as our intercessors, especially in material needs. So, we are encouraged by Christ and the Church to make the prayer of petition a firm part of our lives. But all too often, we do not have the faith to do so. In this particular test, we fail. There is the nagging doubt that God will answer our prayer, and so we think it is a waste of time. Without facing our own thoughts, we perhaps think that He does not really have the power or the willingness to assist us in the concrete thing or things we need, whether they be of the material or the spiritual order. We think we are really on our own, other than having God's company during our weary course during life. Let us make a point of exercising our faith much more when it comes to prayer. We believe that God is our Almighty Father, that He is both all-powerful and all-loving. His power is revealed in His mercy, and His mercy is revealed in His active power. But do we act on this faith in terms of asking for what we need? We ought not only ask for our own needs, but even more for the needs of others, because their needs are all too often far greater than our own. We ought also pray for the dead, that God will hasten their purification and admit them into His eternal presence. Let us then resolve, thinking of our gospel, to pray for all we need